Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Global Consortium of Entrepreneurship Centers Virtual Connections webinar. Today, we're going to have, I know I'm going to have a paradigm shift when it comes to entrepreneurship education. So my name is Jeff Reed. I'm the founding director of the Georgetown University Entrepreneurship Initiative. I'm thrilled to be your host here today. I'm also thrilled to just share with you a little bit about GCEC. In case you're not already familiar, this is the Global Consortium of Entrepreneurship Centers. It is an amazing organization, been around for well over 25 years, maybe. And it's a collection, a community of people that run entrepreneurship centers, mostly at universities and from all over the world. And it's a community where we come together, share best practices, learn from each other, connect on LinkedIn, have fascinating conferences. We have awards, webinars, all kinds of fun things. So if you're not already a member of GCEC, you should absolutely become one right away. Welcome to those of you who are new. Today, our webinar is going to feature Mo Fong, the Executive Director of STVP, Stanford Engineering Entrepreneurship Center. So with that, I'm going to take down my screen and turn it over to Mo. So Mo, over to you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and thanks GCC for having me, and also to Jeff, Holly, and Nadine for helping stand this up. I am so excited to be here because I have been looking at this paradigm shift that is happening right before our eyes. And so I'm just going to go right to it. As mentioned in the beginning, this is going to be very interactive. So please use the chat, put in your questions, and somebody will help moderate at the end. So presentation overview is, first of all, some introductions. Why are we here, first of all? And then also implications specifically for Entrepreneurship Center directors. And then we'll talk a little bit about what is also happening in our classrooms, and then land on some ethical dilemmas, because certainly those are serving as this technology is evolving. And we'll leave lots of room for Q&A. So why are we here? You know, all of us probably are lifelong learners, and we always need to be relevant and sharpen our saws every once in a while. Just like chefs refine their cooking methods with new ingredients and equipment, same with doctors or construction workers. This is a tool that will help enable us and our students to make more impact and be better at what we do. So how should Entrepreneurship Center leaders also incorporate AI as a new method and new tool? So most of you probably already know what generative AI is, but let me refresh our memories with a definition. A generative artificial intelligence, or generative AI, is a type of AI system capable of generating text, images, or other media. Now, videos have become very popular as well, in response to prompts. Generative AI systems use generative models, such as large language models, to produce databases on training data sets that were used to create them. So you can imagine whoever inputs these data training sets will be the ones to manage and train what the outputs and outcomes are. So if we go back to the slide, why is this important? So let me read this quote from somebody who might look and be familiar to us. Artificial intelligence is the future, not only for Russia, but for all humankind. It comes with colossal opportunities, but also threats that are difficult to predict. Whoever becomes the leader in this sphere will become ruler of the world. Now, if that doesn't catch your attention, maybe this next slide will. Harvard Business School, Professor Shikhar Ghosh looks at top 5 technologies that will change the world. So of those 5, AI and deep learning algorithms is also a part of it. And in 2020, Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, predicted that AI will be as consequential to human development as fire and the wheel. He also goes on to say they make better decisions than humans in an increasing number of contexts, but they are unconstrained by moral boundaries. So if that excites you and frightens you all at the same time, I'm right there with you. So my question to you is, how have you been using ChatGPT, whether it's for work or also in your own personal lives? So just drop your answers in the chat, or if you would just like to answer by unmuting your speakers, that'd be great. How have you been using ChatGPT?
I'll tell you, I used it to create a fundraising report or a proposal. and it was really, really scary how good it was.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. You said generating bid responses and synthesizing reports. Trash, research purposes. Anybody use this for fun at home? Outlining grant responses, editing word counts. Yesterday, I wrote a bill of sale for a boat I'm selling. Awesome. Making my emails friendlier. Yes. Having my students practice customer discovery with it. I know my son, who's 15, was writing an email to a teacher, and there's a feature on his email now that says, make me sound more professional. So that was pretty awesome. Wow, awesome. Wix website personal branding, Copilot for transcripts and summaries. Amazing, amazing. So you may even get some ideas for yourselves from the chat. So if you haven't used it, this is really what it looks like. A very simple interface. This is ChatGPT 4. And it has some suggestions, and at the end, it just says message us. Remember, this is not a search engine. This is a space for dialogue. So you can converse with ChatGPT or generative AI just like you are talking to another person. Now, there's a disclaimer on the bottom that says ChatGPT can make mistakes. It has been known to hallucinate as well, so be careful. But it says consider checking important information. So just for fun, I said, okay, give me 5 ways executive directors of entrepreneurship centers at university help their faculty incorporate more generative AI in entrepreneurship education. And the text responses it gave me in like a split second on the left. And then on the image section on the right, I said, create an image of an entrepreneurship center with several types of creative activities and small groups of students working, as well as teaching and administrative work happening. I don't know how many of your entrepreneurship centers look like this or space this big, but this was a little fun rendition of what ChatGPT thinks our centers look like. So what are the real implications for us? So just to frame the context of where I'm coming from, at STVP, our set of activities do reinforce one another, and it's really broken down to 3 particular categories. What makes us unique in a lot of ways from other centers is that we do have groundbreaking research on technology entrepreneurship, whether it's policy or innovations. Professor Rita Katila recently looked at antitrust policies and whether or not antitrust helps or hinders entrepreneurship, startups, and innovation. We also do have teaching that stem from our research. What are some of the teaching approaches? And, we have more than 40 courses that we are associated with teaching entrepreneurship and fellows programs. So how does research reinforce the teaching in the classroom? And lastly, we want to scale these practices outside more broadly into our communities. Many of you might know Lean Launchpad with Steve Blank. That's in over 200 universities now. It did get its start at Stanford and STVP. Well, with that backdrop of research, teaching, and communities, the question that are on a lot of our minds is, will this take my job? Now, when we teach students, it is to prepare them to be part of the workforce and as engaged and productive citizens. But for all of us who are looking at this from a white-collar professional perspective, will we truly be impacted most by generative AI solutions? So that's one of the questions that often come up. Well, in the last couple of weeks, this Wall Street Journal article, a journalist actually proactively tried to help AI take over their job. And the headline here is by 2030, tasks that represent up to 30% of all hours currently worked in the US could be automated by AI. So is it going to replace jobs or just part of our jobs? So we're going to take a quick poll right now. And when I first started doing this presentation for different groups, I used to say, will it replace your job? Yes, no, or partially. I now think that's completely the wrong question to be asking. So our poll is actually going to be, how have you changed the work that you have been doing now as a result of generative AI? So go ahead and answer in the poll. Have you changed the way you work as a result of generative AI? Okay, ooh, interesting. Okay, I think the yeses are taking the lead, 42%, partially 38%, no, around 19%. All right. Well, thank you all for participating. I think we can close the poll. So I think the yeses and partiallys have it, right? So around 81%. But many of you have not changed the work. So maybe this hopefully will help inspire you to try something at the end of the presentation. So we are now in this peak of inflated expectations. So this chart is quite a lot to digest. So I'm going to break this down for you. On the x-axis, the beginning on the left-hand side is when an innovation first comes to market. So there's a lot of things that have yet to be done around AI and the technologies associated with AI. And as we move to the right, we're going to get lots of excitement and potentially reach this peak of inflated expectations. But as with all things, when your expectations are too high, you may end up in the trough of disillusionment because it doesn't work exactly the way the magical promises of that innovation first comes out. But after a lot more iteration, technology will improve and potentially we will reach a slope of enlightenment. And at the very end, at the right, have a plateau of productivity where we know exactly when, how, and where we should be using these technologies. So where is generative AI right now? So this graph was created in August of 2023, so not so long ago. And most people will say we are still in the peak of inflated expectations. So there is a lot of hype around generative AI. And if you try it, for those who haven't tried it before, if you're like, wait a minute, this is not doing what I thought it would do at all, keep trying because the technology will improve. So these dots also are really important. Right now, the dot for generative AI is light blue. So on the bottom, there's a legend that talks about what these dots mean. And it says the plateau will be reached for light blue dots in 2 to 5 years. So it's going to take about 2 to 5 years where the technology improvements will make it such that we may actually use it on a daily basis and rather as a nice to have, but maybe it's fully integrated in 2 to 5 years. So you're not alone thinking that maybe this is just all hype. But what does this mean? So what are the predictions of which types of jobs might be replaced or augmented? So I really like this graph by Goldman Sachs, and I circled the area that is most akin to Entrepreneurship Center leaders, so management. And the good news for all of us is that it is primarily light blue, which means that it will be AI complemented, and very low on the dark blue, which means no automation at all. And there's an absence of gray, which means likely replacement. So we will not be replaced anytime soon. Another view of this is that, you know what,
Wait, hold
it's
on,
not.
Mo.
Yes,
Can you go back to that slide? Because I noticed
absolutely. Yeah.
over there on the right, the second column is educational instruction. Should we be worried about that?
For those of you who are instructors, I say it won't actually be replacing you either. And in fact, that dark blue completely disappears. But I
That's
think
good
the
news.
expectation that as instructors, we will have used it not only for helping ourselves in our jobs, like with grading and assessments, but maybe we'll be integrating it to make actually some of our projects a little bit more informative for our students or other ways to integrate it into our classrooms. So great call out there.
Right,
So
thank you.
not only are we managers, sometimes we are instructors as well. So thank you. Great. And please do interrupt if I'm missing a question on chat that's relevant for the slide. Please just stop me. Okay. I learned about this website, ONET Online, from Andrew Ng, who's a professor of CS here at Stanford. And I thought it was very interesting because if we say that, you know, from the previous slide, that most of it will be AI complement, then you might be wondering, well, which are the activities do I do in my day-to-day work could be augmented or complemented. So ONET is a very interesting website. And just a little bit background, it was developed and sponsored by the U.S. Department of Labor and Employment Training and Administration through a grant for the North Carolina Department of Commerce. And its goal was to understand the rapidly developing nature of work and its impact on the workforce and the US economy. And so what it did was it took all of these activities and created a taxonomy of about 1,000 occupations and each of their activities associated with those occupations. And there were 6 different domains that they looked at. So on the top are worker-oriented domains like worker characteristics, the requirements and experience requirements. And on the bottom are the job-oriented requirements and domains, including things like work activities, what are the general, immediate, detailed work activities, workforce characteristics, and occupation-specific information like titles, tasks, et cetera, as well as technology skills and tools, which I understand was the last GCEC virtual connections. So looking at it all holistically, this view will show you that on the left-hand side is what you see when you go into the website, and you can browse by different work activities. And also there was a Pew Research Center research article that identified all of these different activity IDs. And you can see the taxonomy is very detailed, like 4A1, sub A1, right? So this is a huge compilation of data. And what Pew did was say, okay, of all these activities, thousands of them, which of them have the highest exposure to AI? I red box the ones that I feel that I do on a daily basis as my job as the center director. And it really surprised me and maybe alarmed me a little bit, or maybe it inspired me to say, hey, you know what? Maybe thinking creatively and making decisions and solving problems can be done with ChatGPT as my partner. So if you ever think it's lonely at the top, right, for CEOs and whatnot, well, these are things that maybe ChatGPT can help refine some of our thinking. So even monitoring and controlling resources, performing for or working directly with the public, we can generate ideas using this tool. Now, what are some work activities with medium exposure to AI? I had a really hard time not just red boxing the entire list here, but I'm going to give folks a few minutes to read through them, and I'll just call out a couple that have medium exposure to AI, including communicating with people outside the organization, coordinating the work and activities of others, and even updating and using relevant knowledge and developing objectives and strategies. And I think that's a bulk of our work as center directors, is developing objectives and strategies. So we can pressure test it using AI. And then lastly, what are the activities that have low exposure to AI? So I say this is like our job security list, right? So establishing and maintaining interpersonal relationships, resolving conflicts and negotiating with others, right? These are highly relational types of activities that require person-to-person interaction, right? So this also reminds me of what we think about remote work as well. So I still say, you know, my team does come into the office because that person-to-person interaction is so important. So we're going to have some fun here and do a little bit of a demo. If you want to raise your hand to do this demo with me, you can. And then you'll pop up so I can see you in the gallery a little easier. So please raise your hand or just shout out. But I want to know, what is a challenge that is facing you today and or your entrepreneurship center? And we'll play around with it. Thank you, Travis. All right, so I'm going to flip the screen over to ChatGPT-4. Can you all see this? Yes? All right, fantastic. Yes. Travis, tell me, what is your biggest challenge that we want to play with today?
Well, I'm not sure I'm going to go with biggest, but it's a big challenge that I'd love to check out today. I'm noticing, compared to previous kind of vintages of students, challenges with team formation, larger numbers of single entrepreneurs, less organic team development, and I'd love to kind of bend the curve on that.
All right. Curve on that. So I'm going to put a little bit of a twist here. So I'm noticing, compared to previous vintages of students around team formation, less organic team development. I'll have to bend the curve on that. please suggest 50 ways I can potentially tackle this problem, this challenge. Let's not say it's a problem, it's just a challenge. Every problem is an opportunity, right? All right, let's see what we can do here.
50.
So as it's talking, I would really like, think about design, right? So design thinking, you want to do the yes and challenge it to think about many, many ways to solve your problem.
Mm.
Because even if you have one good idea, that might spark you to think of 10 more ideas, right? And so really, this is a great tool for ideas generation. So let's see, will it come up with 50? And Travis, as you're reading through this list, I'd love for you to think through like, what's popping out at you, right? Is there anything that might like shake loose some other ideas? So as it's going along, for Travis, faculty guidance, joint class projects, soft skills training, alumni talks, value statements, creative team names, networking events, shared goal setting.
There's a lot of good stuff in here for sure.
Yeah. I'll give you a copy of this after we're done. So if folks are interested in seeing this, the beauty of this is that you can share this out too, right? So as you're generating ideas, and it could be done in team settings, right? So if you're trying to solve things together, not just alone, but with your teams, you could use this in your team meetings as well. So 50, well, this is all great and good, but eventually you're going to have to execute on some of these, right? So please help me name a project around these ideas that I can use for execution and generate at least 20 and with names that rhyme. So let's see how it goes. So here's a list of 20 rhyming names for a project that you can start to help execute. Team Stream, Mingle Jingle, Pear Flare. Okay, not bad, right? Troop Loop, Set Jet, Network Perk, awesome. So, I think you can have fun with this, right? Like, I don't know if you're a serious person, but I like to have fun. So, and I don't think ChatGPT knows what is humor yet, but certainly you can create that by just the prompts that you use. Thank you so much, Travis, for playing along. So you can see it actually can have some really positive and informative, useful suggestions. So I'm going to move us along just in interest of time. So I'm going to switch us from thinking about our center to now thinking about what is happening in the classroom, right? So I do believe there is a paradigm shift in entrepreneurship education. This framework is a little bit hard to digest, but we're going to take some time to break this down because I think this is at the crux of why we exist as centers, right? We are trying to educate not just ourselves, but our students. And we do this in service for our students' learning. What is that paradigm shift in entrepreneurship education and pedagogy? I pulled this from Enterprising Competencies, and you'll see the link on the bottom. I'm happy to share all these links out post-call as well. And I like how they framed entrepreneurship education and pedagogy as the combination of three major areas: research, education, and broader entrepreneurship. And these two arrows on the sides really point out that there are opportunities as well as challenges. So I'm going to start with research first, because in the research design, data collection, and analysis and reporting, we will start to see, based on these experiments that are happening in the classrooms, what's more effective in student learning outcomes. All right, because there's going to be a ton of experimentation that's being done just on the education pedagogy alone. So we're looking at our School of Education to help us understand this a little bit better as well. But we're also looking at anecdotally what our faculty is seeing. So here in my center, we started these teaching forums, and we've had 4 or 5 now, where it's just informal discussions with our faculty and exchange of ideas. And some of it is going to feed into more of the research. In education, we're really looking at many different areas. It points out 3 here, but it's learning processes. right? Because our students' brains are getting rewired with not just this type of technology, but all the time they're spending on social media and whatnot. Their brains are operating differently than it was even 2010, 5 years ago. And so how are students learning these days? Are there digital assistants that can help educators? When COVID hit, I know everyone moved from in-person education to online education, and we started using platforms, right? Whether it's Zoom or Google Classrooms, all of these digital assistants. And now all of them are starting to integrate AI as well. So how do we make the most out of the digital assistants that we have started using, whether pre-COVID or during COVID, and then now these new widgets or plugins that are AI enabled? And lastly, to help with assessment. So what are the tasks that we don't want to do as much? Jeff and I were talking about, oh yeah, there's also grading. We have to grade. But how can AI support that? So I've also started hearing faculty use this within assignments to have peer-to-peer reviews. But what if ChatGPT could be a peer reviewer, right? And generate ideas there. And the last piece of this framework is around entrepreneurship as a whole. So what is the changing landscape of entrepreneurship, whether it's in marketing functions, finance functions within startups, and then also the processes and opportunities around business modeling, resourcing, how is that changing, right, as a result of AI? So to make this a little bit more concrete, at STVP, there's been an evolution even here for us. With our business plans in the classroom, this is what we thought we would be teaching 20, 30 years ago. Actually, 20, 30 years ago, we actually didn't think entrepreneurship could be taught. It was thought of more as a vocation, like you're going to teach how to be an entrepreneur. What does that even look like in the classroom? And it started out just business plans. Here's like the 5 different parts of a business plan. This is how you write it. This is how you would consider setting up your business. But then along came lean startup methods, which said, stop just being in your classroom, get outside the building. So our Lean Launchpad class, still being taught by Steve Blank and others, they ask students to go out and talk to 100 different potential customers in the span of 2 weeks, right? So it's very intensive getting students out there. Now, we can also say that for many undergraduates, that's a pretty daunting task, not just because of the numbers of people they need to talk to, but because it's scary talking to strangers, right? So I think trying to get students to be thoughtful about how they frame their pitches, even short ones, how to engage in these customer insight interviews, and also building their confidence, I think is a huge soft skills development that we do in addition to the actual learning of the tactics of how to create their startups. So one of the things in this methodology about being in the field that I think could be augmented by AI is, do you really need to talk to 100? Or if you can still talk to 100, but what if you wanted to talk to 200? Could generative AI create 200 personas that could react to your pitch, right? And you probably don't even have to say what those personas are. You can just say, hey, generative AI, think about 200 different industries and personas that might want to use my innovation and give me some feedback, right? How can that accelerate your technology development? So I really do think the way we teach is going to change significantly, dramatically. So this is an open discussion question. If you want to use your chat, I'd be really curious to crowdsource. How have you seen your faculty incorporate Gen AI into their classrooms? And I gave a few examples. And Travis, you'll be happy to know that we are also looking at how can generative AI help with team formation, right? So I'll give you an example. I'm a founder and I have a certain background. I studied chemical engineering, but I really need somebody to help me with business development, marketing. I'm terrible with marketing and sales. So maybe those are the things that I need help with, but I don't know. What else, what kind of team do I really need in order to help me as a technical person? So you can ask that question. And faculty oftentimes have experiential learning, right? So if they are inviting teams, what are the requirements for teams when they apply to your classes? What are the different diverse set of student experiences and skills you want to make sure these teams have and help these students really fully build out their team and their expertise and culture? All right. So any other suggestions? Yes, we have grants going to faculty to experiment with AI at University of Montana, as well as improve our internal functions and operations. Thanks, Morgan. Bob says, we use it to assist with customer discovery, market analysis, and differentiation modeling processes within our center and program. We are developing an effective AI prompt certificate for our program and center. Awesome. Any others? Yeah, we're just at the beginning stages of doing this. A lot of professors have been experimenting with it for research, but not loving its accuracy. Plus one. So you always have to fact check. I've heard of professors who want to do lit reviews, and they're supposed to read, thousands of pages of research. And what they'll do is cut and paste and ask to give summaries, which have mixed results, but most of them say it's not bad, right? Not bad at translating lots of research lingo into plain English sometimes. Generative AI-based research tool for exhaustive lit reviews. Exactly, Ashwin. You and I are on the same wavelength. Awesome. There will be many, many more applications, and feel free to continue to generate these ideas on chat because it's a great exchange that we're having here. One last one, then we'll move on. Thank you, Jeremy. Revising syllabi for courses, creating more engaging lesson plans, and creating learning activities. It's actually very good at generating learning activities. Creating smarter, more thorough rubrics for activities and projects, generating new analogies to help explain concepts and frameworks. Awesome. Okay, so is it good at doing all of these activities? Mixed results. So again, this is a Wall Street Journal article. The headline is, we asked AI to draft a business plan. So remember, this is something that we asked our students to do 20, 30 years ago as a baseline, right? So is it good at just drafting a business plan? And here's what it got. Let's just say AI is not a bad place to start, but it's hardly ready for prime time. So I distilled down strengths and weaknesses into 4 main bullet points for each. The first strength is that it does have a structure and logic, and it will fill in details and creativity up to a certain point. And it can highlight key elements, that are needed in that business plan. The weaknesses, however, because of the lack of information and inputs that it receives, is lack of detail and analysis, right? Only the founder or the person drafting the business plan has all of those nuances in their minds. And then the repetition, right? It'll often repeat the same things over and over again. But probably said a different way, but it definitely doesn't come up with a lot of original thought. And there are occasional inaccuracies and lack of personalization. And as we know, many investors want the personal storytelling. So it won't be able to do that for you. So are there other ideas? Yes, and certainly I want to capture everything in the chat, and we'll hopefully be able to send it out to the audience later. But other ideas here, just 6 of them, is integrating AI-driven projects across the curriculum, innovative solutions through AI-driven analysis and problem solving, governance, regulatory compliance, and entrepreneurial ethics considerations. So taking different perspectives in mind, creative and ethical uses in marketing and product design, personalization we already talked about, and team formation we talked about. And we can't forget that many of us work within an academic setting. So we really need to work within the policies of our universities. So at Stanford, I pulled this straight out of our generative AI policy guidelines from February 2023, and maybe there'll be another update this year. But it says, in particular, I'm reading the red, using generative AI tools to substantially complete an assignment or exam, for example, by entering exam or assignment questions, is not permitted, full stop. But it does go on to say individual course instructors are free to set their own policies regulating the use of generative AI tools in their courses. So a lot of this is going to have to come from the ground up, where the individual course instructors are infusing them into their classrooms. And if there are enough professors doing this or instructors doing this, maybe those can be codified into an overall university policy at the end. I think this is going to take some work, right? Because many instructors, if you've been teaching the same materials for the last 5, 10, 20, even 30 years, how eager are you to change that curriculum, right? So probably a mixed result, but I think we do need to encourage our instructors, for the sake of our students and their learning, to try these tools. I also want to give a shout out to K-12 education. I think universities are lagging behind K-12. Maybe it's just the sheer number, right? I love Teach AI because they have codified a certain set of principles, which have been updated as of February 2024, right? Because AI, they are a policy leading indicator. So I will read these out loud because they're important to think about. One is purpose, right? The purpose is to use AI to help all students achieve educational goals. 2 is compliance, reaffirm adherence to existing policies. Knowledge is number 3, promoting literacy around AI. 4 is balance, realizing the benefits of AI and also addressing the risks. Because right now, students are so excited. We just had Sam Altman this week, and man, that line wrapped around buildings to go see him. And so they're like, yes, AI is going to like solve all our problems, but there are unintended consequences. So we need a balanced view. Number 5 is integrity, advancing academic integrity. 6 is agency, maintaining human decision-making while using AI. Can't cut out humans completely from the equation. And 7 is evaluation, regularly assessing the impacts, because the technology itself will change over time. So what are those ethical considerations in generative AI biases? This is also very recent, right? Like I said, the outputs are only as good as the inputs, and who has access to the technology to give inputs. And I am very cognizant of the education gap that we have here in the United States. Who has access to tools? During COVID, many students who were not able to go to the classrooms didn't even have access to the technology or Wi-Fi to do their homework, right? So who has access is important. This example, obviously, Gemini, Google got into a lot of hot water because they generated images of America's founding fathers that were not realistic at all, right? And somewhat offensive to a certain population of people. So what is the White House and the United Nations doing? They are putting together safe, secure, and trustworthy development policies around AI. So there's going to be a lot more policy development, not only at the national level, but at the global level. This is a snapshot of maybe what's happening in your state. So what is happening is about half of the states have legislation around the use of AI. Many don't. And when you take a look, I'm in California, red means enacted and proposed legislation. And some have enacted legislation and some are just in the proposal phase of legislation. So keep an eye on this, and the policies is probably another whole webinar in itself. But it'd be fascinating to ask generative AI to take all the policies and ask it, what are the similarities and what are the differences? That would be something that could be easily done over time. So this is what I'll end with, and then we can take some Q&A. What are the opportunities of Gen AI to enhance the activities of your entrepreneurship center? So the quote I want to leave with too is, any problem, if you see this as a problem, is an opportunity. The bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity. So I actually think there are a lot of opportunities here. And I hope you do too. And I hope this also inspires you. If you haven't tried it, do something small. And I say in some ways it could even be very addictive because it's actually quite fun. And I'll just end there. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Questions?
That was great, Mo. It looks like we're starting to get some questions. I know I've been playing around on Chat GPT with some of the things you were talking about here and finding some fun stuff. Elizabeth, you got your hand up. Why don't you jump in and ask your question?
Okay, I didn't actually mean to raise my hand, but still, I'm curious to know, the only guidance that our university has given us is on what not to put in the prompts. As far as data and what data, needs to be secure. I'm curious to know how you're hearing people respond to that. Because many of us use it extensively, and I'm getting ready to give a presentation and I want to know how to guide people.
Absolutely. I hear that concern because the data gets sucked in and be used in these learning models. I would say look at what is private information, and there's definitions about what private information consists of. It's names, addresses, right? Even financial information, definitely don't put those things in, right? So it's really just the general data and privacy security principles that you would think for even like financial and banking institutions. But I don't quite know if you are asking the flip side of showing what you should be doing as with prompts. So maybe you can give me a little bit more context about, what your concern is.
Well, I'm actually, a heavy user and believe in using it a ton and want to encourage people to play and use it. And I just want to make sure that I allay people's fears that, all their data is going to be stolen and that they're going to reveal a secret or something like that, which I don't think is really happening. And we've got some university guidelines, but they're very, it's not very clear on what it's actually saying. So that's really what I'm asking is, and I think that, if you look at the data and it's stuff that you're, it's not personalized data and you're asking for ideas, like all the examples that you've given so far, should be pretty straightforward.
Exactly. And, if you are trying to help people be less fearful about using it, developing those guidelines, I think is great. I would also caveat this by it depends on the tool that you're using, right? If you go to the terms of service of these tools, it will definitely lay out what it will and will not use your data for. If it doesn't, I would be a little bit more skeptical. So I think that's why people gravitate towards the tools that are known, because you do not know explicitly sometimes what other tools or organizations are using the data for. So just be aware. It is, users be aware. But if you are talking about, guiding your own team or your organization around this, right, you can give positive examples as well as the negative examples, the do's and don'ts. Hopefully that helps. Other questions?
So Mo, have you used Chat GPT for any kind of lesson planning?
Sometimes I will ask it for activities that we can do. I think my course is very specific to having case studies with CEOs and site visits and topical. But right now I am more relying on it to help me with the activities. My hope though, next year when I get to play around this a little bit more, is having the students themselves use it. So rather than helping me with the actual curriculum, is actually having the students play around with it, especially in the peer review stage. So what I want to do is help them with critical thinking skills. So when they get the outputs, right, from generative AI, is say, critique the output and tell me if it's helpful or not so helpful, on why. So asking a lot more of the why questions than the what questions. Because I think one way people have been using it is to generate ideas, just like we did with Travis. Like, give me, 50 ideas for this activity. But the most helpful thing I can do for my students is evaluate those, right? Be that teacher and teach the generative AI to think more critically, because you know what they say, it's not actually the doing of the exercise that is helping students learn, right? If they can teach the exercise, that's even better.
That's great. That's great. I had an experience about a year ago when I had a guest speaker who was launching his own AI-based technology. And because his product wasn't ready to launch when he thought, he canceled with about 30 minutes before class. So I went to ChatGPT and had it generate a lesson plan helping me explain what his product might have been about or what his presentation might have been about. And it ended up being good enough. I think it actually worked really well. But I wouldn't recommend doing that all the time. But it was certainly
Wow.
It was a very, very effective way to get a last minute lesson plan.
Fantastic. If folks have other things they want to share, it doesn't have to be a question. I just love learning about all this. Travis, go for it.
Yeah, I mentioned this in the chat a little bit, but I was so blown away that I'd love to just briefly share with y'all what I saw at MIT yesterday and the day before. They just launched the Disciplined Entrepreneurship revised book. If any of you are familiar with that one, excellent framework for the earlier stages of entrepreneurship. And then Paul Cheek has his new Startup Tactics book that just launched. But what I saw was a project they have underway, complete with devs working at the Entrepreneurship Center to integrate GPT right into that workflow. And for me, it was really an epiphany, because really, while ChatGPT can be amazingly useful as an external tool, when you're using it right there in an established methodology that's prompting students to do different stuff, the power is exponential. But the last thing I wanted to share with everyone is the point you just made, Mo, is something that they're really experiencing right now, which is the minute you give students this capability, their tendency is just want to use the output as is. And that's a big challenge for us. I think as a community, we want these students to be critical thinkers and to keep the human in the loop and to build on top of AI, as opposed to, okay, you drive.
Right.
Anu has your hand open.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's sort of similar. I mean, do you let your students, you quoted Vinod Khosla, it's a quote I use as well, but do you actually ask students to use ChatGPT to, come up with big problems and then come up with the solutions? So with idea generation, not just the, evaluation, but the actual idea generation, they may be using it already, but I'm just, curious as to whether any of you actually ask them to do that.
Absolutely. I've had conversations about cold start problems, and it's interesting how many students, because they follow the crowds of saying, hey, I just want to start a company, but I don't know what. Because they think entrepreneurship is the thing to do, especially here at Stanford. It's like, oh, everybody seems to want to start their own company, and I should too, but I don't know what. And there is a subset, I haven't done this myself, but I can see the potential to say, this is my background, this is what I'm passionate about. When I studied engineering, like there were very specific things that I could see, as applications to solve big problems, right? Why do students want to, be in medicine or, study what they are studying, is because they do come in seeing that there are things in the world they want to influence and solve. But if they want to do it through entrepreneurship, through founding a company, I bet you, and we could even demo it now, like ChatGPT could give them ideas. Now, whether these ideas are viable, I'm not sure, right? And that's where you still need to get out of the building and see if there's a viable product. Because there's also different types of organizations they can start. They can have a profit motive to start an organization too, or it could be a nonprofit, right? It doesn't all have to be one type, So I really think that there is potential to give students those ideas of what they could be starting.
And I haven't tried this, but just hearing what you described, this you could feasibly, right, put together an exercise where the student enters a lot of their own personal interests, characteristics, problems whatever, all kinds of stuff, and then say generate a few business ideas that might be of interest to this person. Perhaps
Yeah.
that would work.
I was thinking about, that's why I'm asking. I was wondering whether to set that as an exercise at the beginning of, the next semester, but I'm wondering. Yeah. So that's why I wanted.
Seems to be a good way to get people off of that blank page problem. So
one thing I start my classes with is, what do you think your purpose is? Right? Because there's a great diagram, like Ikigai. I think most of you know about Ikigai, like what's my purpose? Like, what am I good at? What does the world need? Right? And what are my experiences? How can my skills contribute? And what can I get paid for? There's an amazing, almost identical Venn diagram in Professor Tom Byer's Technology Ventures book. Like when you think about your organization for your startup, again, it's what are the unique value propositions that your organization is going to be good at? What does the world need, right? And what are you passionate about? What's the vision for that organization? It's almost like identical. So those may be the prompts that you would use to figure out what's that intersection of that Venn diagram.
So Mo, I think we have one more question, maybe time for just one more. In the chat, Jeremy has asked, what are 2 or 3 sources you find most useful for keeping up with AI tools, tactics, and ways we can apply it in our work?
Yeah. Somebody mentioned Ethan Mollick, so he has a blog, One Useful Thing, so that one's amazing. I also really love deeplearning.ai, which is a free resource that Andrew Ng helped to start. And there's courses that you can also take. I took generative AI for everyone and learned so much in plain language. Not a coder, so it's like, oh, this is how the algorithms work. And just being able to speak the language, I think, is going to be very important for all of us. So those are the 2 off the top of my head that I could recommend. And if you all have any more, put them in the chat. I'd love to learn too.
It looks like Holly's put Ethan's name in there. And yeah, please add more resources there. So please join me in thanking Mo Fong. What a great presentation. I know I've learned quite a bit and excited about kind of what I might do playing around with what I have been learning here. So just to close us out here, I do want to encourage anyone who is a member of GCEC to join our Slack channel. This is a resource that is limited to members. While these webinars are free to anybody, our Slack channel is a members-only opportunity to continue. Maybe somebody can create a sub-channel in there around how we're using AI for entrepreneurship centers. It's a good way to continue this sort of a dialogue. So if you're not already in the Slack group, you can reach out to Holly, and she can email you an invitation to join. Also, coming up soon, we have a new program with GCEC. We call it our New Frontier Summit. It's coming up in Bangkok in just a couple of months. The Sasson School of Management is hosting a global summit. So the GCEC community, which historically has been mostly North American, we're going to join a great number of colleagues around the world in Bangkok this summer. So registration's open for that. So go ahead and register and get your plans together really quickly. That one's coming up soon. In the fall, we'll have our regular annual conference, which will be in November at Babson College. And next month, it's almost as if we knew that you might ask about this. Thank you for the prompt a few minutes ago. Paul Cheek from MIT will be here to talk about the new version of disciplined entrepreneurship and startup tactics. So today's session seems like perhaps was a really good lead in for that. With that, we're gonna officially close out. And once again, thank you, Mo, so much. Thank you to Nadine and Holly at GCEC headquarters for putting this together. And I look forward to seeing you all at another virtual connection or real world conference, or maybe in some AI virtual reality somewhere.